Good afternoon, Hope College. How you all doing? Hope you are doing okay. Wanted to, as we begin, my name is Javon Willis, and I serve as the director for the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. And joining me on stage is my brother, Shamari Tate, Campus Ministries, and my sister from another sister, Mrs. Bonnie, with CAPS. And we are here together for a couple of reasons. One, to first of all, if you have not heard about what happened to one of our faculty members, I advise you to, on the other side of this, to check your email from President Scogan, alerting you to the medical incident with our beloved faculty, Fred Johnson. And so we did not want to ignore, I think, what this feels like as a member of our community, because I think obviously being connected to this community, when one of us hurts or in pain, I'm sure many of us may be feeling some kind of way. And honestly, I even kind of slightly feel a little distracted even in this moment in real time. But I think those are the right reasons, right? When your mind or thoughts are with people that you care about. And so to that end, I wanted to make sure that, number one, if you need to talk or need to connect with someone, we have the amazing services of CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services. So I definitely would, if needed, invite you to connect with them. And if you're familiar with the same day appointment stuff, if you make those appointments by noon, they'll make sure to see you, even if after that, we'll figure that out. And then, as people of faith, the next best thing I think we can do is to pray. And so I wanted to ask someone probably a little bit closer to God, my brother Shamari, to be a part of just offering a word of prayer for our dear brother and colleague. Shamari.
It's in this moment where God is close to us all. Our word reminds us that God is near to the brokenhearted and to the crushed in spirit. So would you bow your heads with me in a word of prayer? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we come to you to intercede on behalf of our brother, Dr. Fred Johnson. God, we thank you for the pillar that he has been in this community. God, we thank you for the lives that he has touched, for the impact that he has had from generation to generation to generation. God, I'm reminded right now of the electricity that he brings to lectures, to discussions, Lord, the life that his presence brings to a room. And right now, Lord, we intercede on his behalf as he is in a valley. Lord, we ask right now that you would send a legion of angels to cover him, to protect him, to be with him, and Lord, ultimately to heal him. We pray boldly right now for healing. We pray that you would wrap your loving arms around him, his family, his loved ones. Give them what they need, Lord. Lift them up and restore unto them the joy that is their salvation. Lord, we are sure of this, that you are our refuge, and that you that began a good work in us will bring it to completion. So, Lord, we're reminded right now in this moment of the words from the Apostle Paul, that in weakness is where your power is perfected. So, Lord, be perfected as the doctors make decisions. Be perfected in this community as we reel and as we process. Be perfected, Lord, as we ask you why. Why now? Why this? And Lord, may we rest in those words that you said to your apostles, that we do not understand now what you are doing, but we can trust and have hope and security in the fact that we will understand it later. So Lord, bless our speaker. Bless this time. May we leave this space better than what we came. And in all our ways, help us to acknowledge you. And with this, we come into agreement, and we all say, amen. Amen. God bless you.
So it is truly a privilege to stand before you today at the 2026 Black History Lecture featuring Dr. Bines. This gathering is more than an event. It is a continuation of a vital conversation here at Hope College and within our communities. One that calls us to reflect and to grow boldly in our leadership as advocates for justice, equity, and care within our communities. And so we recognize, acknowledge, and affirm the historic and contemporary solidarities and intersections between Black and Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the extraction of brilliance, energy, and life for labor forced upon people of African descent for more than 400 years. As Hope College, we are dedicated to advancing solutions that promote equality, dismantle oppressive systems, and uplift the voices and experiences of marginalized communities. We understand that acknowledging the labor of enslaved peoples is an essential step in addressing the historical and present-day injustices that continue to shape our society. We carry our ancestors within us, and we are continually called to be better, to do better. We commit to dismantling racism in spaces of our work, and I invite you to work beside us to create change. And if there's one thing to take away from this, it's that we all have the power, right, to be agents of change, advocating for equity and inclusion in our communities. So now, please help me welcome to the Black History stage, Darryl C. Rounds for an artistic expression hanging by a thread. Show him some love as he comes.
Hello. I have the honor of serving as the Vice President of Black Student Union, and it is now my privilege to present this original piece. I had words to set up the piece I was going to read, but hopefully by the time I read it and finish, it speaks for itself. So here's hanging my thread. I hang by a thread. The fibers bite into my throat. 1,000 tiny knives stealing the air that should be mine. Sweat soaks my torn clothes. It runs down my ribs and into the ragged hem, a hot, stinging rain. Around me are voices, shouts and curses shaped from hatred, each one a stone thrown at my chest. Their anger crowds my skull until my thoughts are nothing but the echo of those voices. Blood and tears mingle on my lips, a salty metal taste that fills my mouth and settles at the back of my tongue. My body is a map of violence. Bruises bloom like bruised fruit, skin split into stitched with pain, muscles shredded, and bones crushed into new, monstrous angles. I'm on display, exposed, cataloged, no longer a man, but an emblem, a martyr suspended between mercy and malice. My feet lift from the ground. I will not touch the earth again, as I once did. Gravity takes me and makes me something else. The air that used to belong to me is rented now, leased in ragged wheezes until the lease expires. The forest scents that once comforted me, pine and loom, the honest breath of green, fight with the stench of burning flesh. The smells climb into my nostrils and plug them. The world's sweetness is barred from me. Sounds intrude like unspoken guests, slurs and taunts barreling through my ears, a relentless barrage that drowns the songs I once knew. Voice, the one that might have spoken freedom, has been chained inside me. I am mute to the world that built me. Eyes close around me like lids drawn over a dying day. Faces lean in, their eyes bright with the sick satisfaction of executioners. I see the hunger for my end in them, even as my vision blurs. I know the tomorrow that was promised to me has already been stolen. I'm losing everything in pieces: breath, smell, sound, taste, sight, until the list of losses become the shape of who I am. The thread that holds me thins and thins until all that remains is silence. Thank you. And now I will call Zion Glenn to the stage, for he will be giving our intro to the speaker. Give him a round of applause. Please clap.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, as mentioned, my name is Zion Glenn. I am the trustee on the esteemed Black Student Union, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today for the 2026 Black History Month lecture, Dr. Derrick Bines. Dr. Derrick Bines is an assistant professor in the Department of Counseling at San Francisco State University. He earned his PhD in counseling psychology and a master's in counseling, family, and human services from the University of Oregon, and his Bachelor of Arts in sociology from California State University in Fullerton, where he was a McNair Scholar. Dr. Bines completed pre- and post-doctoral training at University of California, Berkeley's Counseling and Psychological Services. Dr. Bines' commitment to improve the experiences of marginalized people and creating inclusive academic movements or environments is present across his professional roles. His research explores the academic experiences of Black and other marginalized students, as well as the role and experiences of helping professionals in improving environments in which marginalized populations seek support. He is a co-author of Workbook for Social Action for Counselors, Psychologists, and Helping Professionals: Strength, Solidarity, Strategy, and Sustainability. A book that empowers helping professionals to take action against oppressive forces. As an instructor, Dr. Bines believes in collective wisdom and the value of lived experiences. His goals for students are to think critically about course content, understanding the ways in which culture and identities impact development and psychological processes, and be able to apply material outside the classroom. Dr. Bines has worked in community mental health agencies and in higher education settings, including university counseling centers, advising mentoring programs, and in equity and inclusion. Most importantly, Dr. Bines is a product of the community and is a proud husband, father, son, and sibling. Now, without further ado, let's give our esteemed guest, Dr. Bines, a warm welcome.
Appreciate you. Move this a bit. Folks can hear me all right? Some nods, all right, for sure. I appreciate that, Woo. As well, right? Appreciate the reading of that bio. A lot of words to say I care about people. My word looks at how we can better care for people and how we can create spaces in which people feel cared for. Right, so a lot of that sums into that. And so I want to start off with just an immense gratitude for being here today. to spend this time with you all during the 100th anniversary of Black History Month, right, to acknowledge and to hold true just the giving folks a recognition of the struggle, the contributions, the joys of Black folks for the last 100 years. And so really grateful to be here with you all. So professional bio read, right? For me, when I enter spaces, it's important to kind of acknowledge a bit more than myself, right? And so where I'm from, it's not uncommon for folks to ask you how you relate to a particular space, right? They might ask you, oh, where you from? Who you know around here, right? Who are your people, right? A lot of words to ask. How do you relate to the space that we're in, right? Do you know folks that we trust and care for? Do you care about those folks as well, right? So I try to start with that. So in part, right, want to extend my gratitude to folks, CDI for the invitation here and for the hospitality so far. It's also important for me to name, right, that last line in my bio, I exist in community. And that's always been the case for me. Even as I present and stand up here as myself, right, I'm not just with me. I'm carrying some of my elders and my ancestors with me, some of my loved ones. And so wherever I speak, right, present workshops, all of those things, I always like to name 3 people in the space with me. Right, my grandparents, who we lovingly call Pop and Pearl. Right, Pearl has transitioned and is one of my favorite ancestors now. Right, I also need to name my mom as well. Right, three pillars. My mom is also probably my most favorite ancestor at this point. Right, so anytime you see me, right, you see at least those 3 folks kind of channeling through me. Right, and in this space, I also want to kind of pause for a bit, right, and give you all the opportunity to either name or think about loved ones who are with you, right, whether they're with you, whether they're ancestors, whether they're elders, right, loved ones, even if you just saw them before this and you're going to see them again today, right, I want to give some space for folks to maybe say them out loud to yourselves, kind of think through them, whoever kind of comes to mind. So I'll pause a bit to let some of those folks' name enter the space. So if you take a moment, maybe say their names out loud or think of them to yourselves. For sure. Sure. I heard a couple whispers in there, right? I saw some thinking faces. I saw some folks like, what am I supposed to do right now? That's okay too, right? Nothing, right? But maybe in that questioning of what you're supposed to do, you thought about somebody else, even if it was for a split second. And so I ask you to keep those folks in mind as we're kind of spending time together today. So I can at least go to, so my title slide. We All We Got, Self and Community Care are More Than Buzzwords. And so for me, this title comes from a saying that me and some of my people used to say as we were kind of navigating through college, right? It wouldn't be uncommon to hear, folks saying, we all we got. It was like an affirmation as we were kind of moving through on this journey to kind of get to and get through higher ed. And that we wasn't just us as the individuals in that space, right? It was our communities that maybe we had come from, right? The communities that we cared about and the communities that cared for us, right? So when I say we, I'm referencing a collective we, right? Not just the individuals that were there. And so, because I'm a professor and my students are always like, hey, I want to know the plan for the day, right? They might be asking where they can tune in and tune out, right? So I wanted to crowd. I saw some head nods in the crowd as well, right? Tune in, listen to everything your professors have to say. This is the flow of that I'm hoping to follow today. My students will also tell you that there are times where I talk ahead of my slides, right? So I might be saying something that might not come up on the slide till 2 slides later. I'll catch us up. We'll work together to kind of figure that out. So appreciate your grace and your patience there with that, right? But this is generally the flow that I'm hoping to talk about, how I relate to these topics, lessons from my community, lessons from history briefly, and then what I'm calling here this kind of systemic or systematic approach to how we can care for ourselves, our community, and how that can ultimately help us to care for society, if you will. And so, self-care, community care, from what I can tell, it feels like the last maybe 10, 15 years, terminology has been used way more than before, right? Has become much more popularized. Maybe it was just in kind of certain spaces, but the way we thought about self-care didn't really feel as prominent until, I would say, the last kind of 15 years. And even still, as I engage with folks about these topics, there's still a varied kind of understanding, a varied kind of relationship to what these mean, right? And what they mean to them and how they see themselves as kind of fitting into or relating to topics of self-care, community care. And so just the question, I won't have you break out and then report back this time. But I do want you to think to yourselves, right, when you hear these terms, self-care, community care, what comes up for you? Where does your mind go automatically? What are topics that come up? Is there resistance that comes up? Like resistance in a few ways, maybe. Are there, what thoughts, what feelings do you have about these terms? Does it feel like topics that you actually relate to? Or do they feel quite distant from how you understand yourself and the world around you? And so for some folks, right, you might have really positive associations, right? It's like, oh no, self-care, I get it. That's it. Whether or not I'm actually quote unquote good at it, I understand that's something that could be really useful in my life. And some folks, especially related to the term self-care, it can be a bit off-putting, right? That self word, right? Hey, I'm from a collectivistic culture, right? It's not something that actually connects to me. I'm taught, right? I deeply value actually not thinking about myself as only myself, but rather myself in the context of my community, right? And that's where we'll bring in that community care. Kind of what does that look like? How do we actually engage in that? How can we care for ourselves, right? How might self-care and community care actually be a bit more related than sometimes we talk about them as, and sometimes we believe them to be? And so, couple definitions, right? So here are 2 definitions, self-care as described by National Institute on Mental Health and the World Health Organization, right? That first one, I'll read it. Taking time to do things that will help you live well and improve both your physical and mental health. The second one, the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a health worker. There's a definition not on the slides that I also want to bring into this space, right? This definition of radical healing, right? This term is from the Psychology of Radical Healing Collective, right? So a group of socially just minded, right, psychologists of color, really rooted in the tradition of radical healing, right? Radical healing, radical meaning, hey, the world is sending us messages that we shouldn't kind of engage in this, and so I'm going to intentionally engage in a healing that's connected to not just me, but my lineage, right? The generations before me and the generations after me, right? So they talk about healing identity-based wounds, right? Including those wounds that have been experienced by previous generations, right? It involves a personal and collective actions that promote living a life, with dignity and respect, right? In two of those three, there's an explicit mention, the one I read and one on the screen, there's an explicit mention of individuals and communities, right? So there's a linking between both of those terms that I want us to sit with, right? That I want us to be able to acknowledge, right? So we can already see this, we can start to see the connection between the two. And so lessons from community, right? For folks who might be familiar, it's a Proud Family reference, depending on, I might show some of my age, but some of y'all might be like, oh, I know that from the archives of the Disney Channel. Some of y'all are like, oh, I knew the new version of that, right? But so, what my bio was read, degrees, all of that, right? And I'm reading you definitions. But my introduction to care came well before I actually knew what these terminologies were. Right, like most things, right, I learned it from the folks around me, right, my homies, my family. There were things that we did that even if we didn't say, hey, we're engaging in self or community care, it was just that. And I'm hearing some mm-hms, which I welcome, right? I'm from a culture of call and response, right? So if you feel something, you can snap and do all of that, right? And so what did we say, right? So that looked like, right, I'm thinking about folks who maybe on Saturday nights were sitting outside just playing music with to themselves, just kind of posted up, right? Maybe talking, maybe not, right? Maybe with folks, maybe not, but just kind of chilling, right, with the music playing. Because Saturday nights was their time to kind of decompress. I've worked all week, right? I want some time. Right, my family knows I love them, but I need some time on my own, right? Those folks was getting that care in. Listen to my music at the volume I want to listen to without having to think about what other folks want to hear too, right? Also, folks just kind of posting up, period. Right, I knew families that if they had a home and in the garage, sometimes they might have a TV in the garage, and so in the summertime, right, they might be outside, kind of chilling, watching TV there. Right, folks kind of talking, playing games with each other, right, cards, right, dominoes, whatever you call it. That was care, right? There were these moments that drew our attention into the time, right? It kind of, even though we weren't necessarily escaping, folks were very aware of the world that we've been living in, right? For those moments, the activities kind of caused a direct focus. And so it was these kind of brief moments of escape, right? That's care. And when we did it with folks, right, that's the community kind of caring and sharing with each other. Right, I also knew folks who on weekends or maybe depending on their work schedule, some mornings will go on what they call walk the mall, right? And so see some NOS folks might be familiar with walking the mall, right? In the summertime, the mall got air conditioning. Exactly, right? And so I'm not going to the mall to shop, right? I'm going to move my body. Right, I might end up doing a little window shopping, maybe, right? But folks were going with the intention of moving themselves in an environment that actually felt comfortable, right? The track isn't always as inviting, right? Running through the neighborhood isn't always possible, right? If I felt comfortable in the mall, I'm gonna go to the mall, right? So these were things all around me. Community care, right? It was big for us to, if we all went somewhere and we left separately, like we drove ourselves, to communicate that we made it home that night. Right? Folks might get upset if you don't text or call that you made it home. Right? That's the way of, hey, I care for you. Right? I care about you being able to make it home. If you're dropping somebody off, right, making sure that you see that they go into their home or into their complex before you pull off. That's caring for folks in really explicit ways. Right, and then when I learned to drive, that was part of the messaging. Hey, if you drop someone off, make sure you see them go in, right, as this form of care. I remember when Little Caesars came out with the $5 hot and readies, right? Some of y'all either remember when it came out or it's just been out. We would kind of put our money together, right? Three of us, maybe $1.50 a piece. Right, don't do the math, don't check me on the math, but somewhere around there, right? And now we all ate lunch that day, right? Whereas maybe one of those folks in that time wouldn't have ate lunch that day, right? Community care. Right? We can think about mutual aid in this way too. Right? But it was important for us to be doing these things together. Important for us to feed each other in that way, to make sure each other was safe. Also, maybe some of y'all can relate to this. I'm assuming some of y'all can relate to this. When you somewhere and you see another black person you don't know, you say, "What's up?" You might give a nod. Depending on your peer level, if it's your peer, you might go up. Right? Somebody a little older, you might go down. That's a "I see you." Right? That's a form of care. And the way we know it's a form of care, because if they don't do it back, you are appalled. Right? Right? Some laughter, folks understand what that is. Right? Again, community care. These are things that let me know that care was a part of the environment, even though I wasn't getting slides on self-care. I wasn't getting slides on community care. Right? These are things that have been there. History also tells us, right, that folks have cared for each other. Right? Folks might be familiar with that symbol. Sankofa bird, right? Sankofa, coming from the Akan language in Ghana, right? Meaning literally to go back and fetch, right? So being able to look back at the history to help us think about how to move forward. You can't tell the experience of black folks only through the lens of struggle, right? Our histories are full of laughter, full of sharing food, right? Full of community, full of care. In her book, We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance, Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson reminds us that while anti-blackness has impacted the experience of black people, it is not the totality of blackness. And so history tells us to look at more than just the struggle, right? To invite moments of joy into our lives as ways of honoring the ancestors. Right, of ways to honor our elders, of ways to connect to folks of the past. So, in kind of bringing us to kind of current, I want to spend a little time just kind of talking about contextual influences. Right, so far I've talked about some of my own lessons of community and kind of painting some picture that drops some things about some of that context. But I want to just take a little time to kind of explicitly kind of mention how the context that we live in influences us. And so on the slide, you see maybe a little busy of a model, but I want to introduce the ecological systems framework. Is that something folks have heard before? Some nods for sure, and some smiles. So hopefully you actually connect to what it's talking about. Right, so in short, right, developed as a way to explain how an individual's environment influences their development. And we can think about that both in stressful and in supportive ways, right? And so as I'm kind of talking about this, I want to invite you all to think about yourselves at the center of this model and some of the factors, some of the things that might come up in your life, right? So at the center of the model, you have an individual, right? All of their identities, right? Different attachment styles, right? Early experiences, inner working memories, if you will, right? So there's this person that exists, right? The graphic has a young black child in the center. That first level is the microsystem. The microsystem is the level closest to the individual. So these are things that the individual has direct contact with. Family, friends, school, right, church, faculty programs, colleagues, social media becomes part of that, right? Before I go further too, all these levels are kind of multi-directional, right? So they influence each other, right? So they're always there. So the microsystem, things that the person has direct contact with. The mesosystem, things that within them, the interactions between parts of that microsystem. So think about different friend groups, if you will. For some of y'all, if the different friend groups interact, you're like, it might be a little stressful, mixing group of friends. For some of y'all, it's all love, right? So their dynamics influence and impact you and how you're kind of developing or relating to particular spaces. Right, so that's the mesosystem. The exosystem are things that impact the person, but might not necessarily, or they impact the folks in their microsystem directly, but might not necessarily come into direct contact with the individual. Kind of the easiest thing to frame here is like parental leave policies at work. The child might not necessarily be, like the policy isn't for the child, but because the parent has to abide by this policy, then that might impact the child in that way. This next system, macro system, this cultural environment that folks live in, attitudes, ideologies, right, policies. You get cultural strengths here. You get kind of systemic racism at this way as well, right? The macro system, the macro level is anytime folks talk about a system, the systems approach, I think we're often thinking about the macro system in that way. And then the chronosystem is the time or events or transitions that occur over time in a person's life, right? So think about someone being in elementary school during COVID-19 when it first hit in 2020 versus someone who was an adult already. That's impacting folks differently. And that development shows up. An example two things that I kind of bring up when I'm talking about the chronosystem to really kind of share is, and I'll ask for a little participation here. Who in here knows what a floppy disk is? Okay. Who in here has used a floppy disk? Okay. So you see how some folks are laughing? They're kind of like, oh, maybe I'm a little older than some of those folks without, hands down. Right, so the chronosystem, right, technological advances that have happened throughout life, right? Some of you all in here, I won't ask hands this time. Some of you all remember when the iPhone came out, right? Some of you all, the iPhone has been out the entire time, right? You don't know a world that doesn't exist without an iPhone, right? So it changes the way you're actually engaging with the world and technology, right? All of that's captured within that chronosystem at that level. And so if we can get behind this idea that there are all these different factors that are influencing us, both in ways that are supportive and in ways that might be causing stress, then I want to kind of have us think about taking the systems approach to care, right? At this individual level, at maybe a community level, we can think kind of locally, and maybe cultural community, and what I'm calling here a societal level, but knowing that a lot of these kind of blend together, right? The way things that occur at an individual level, right, ultimately might have an impact on the system, and then might also kind of impact what I'm calling this society, a kind of greater good from this perspective. And that things might not always fit cleanly into one of these categories, right? But generally, just a way of kind of organizing how I want to talk about care. Let's start with at the individual level. And as I'm talking through some of this, right, invite you all to kind of think to yourself. And so, at an individual level, right, I think one of the first things as we're thinking about care, and we'll get to kind of care practices, is being able to recognize signs of distress. A lot of times when I'm talking with folks across identities, we don't really kind of notice the buildup. We just notice when it's there, right? I don't notice the maybe shirt and socks that I left in the room. I just recognize when my room is dirty in all of these things, right? And so what I want to encourage us to do is to be able to think about how to actually recognize these things that they're building, or as they're building, They can show up in our actions, right? You might find yourself withdrawing. You might find yourself isolating. You might find yourself having a lot of stressful conversations about stressful things, right? And it's not to say we should ignore stressful things, right, and not talk about them, right? We could actually argue that talking about them can be productive. But if we find that we're leaving a lot of our conversations still stressed, that might be an indicator, right, that you might need particular types of care or care in a different way, or to be aware of the type of conversations you're having. Right? We can pay attention to our thoughts, right? What are we telling ourselves? What is our self-talk like, right? What is our self-talk like, and how might it differ from what we might tell ourselves when we're feeling joyous, right? When we're feeling full of care, right? How have things changed? Are there particular times in which our self-talk turns to things that are productive for us, right? So being aware of our thoughts, being aware of how things can show up in the physical form, right? I always encourage folks to pay attention to sleep. Sleep can be this huge indicator, right? Too much sometimes, right? A lot longer than typical, a lot shorter than typical. You're finding yourself a longer time to fall asleep, maybe more disrupted than particular times, right? Maybe sometimes we can know, like, all right, well, finals comes around, I might sleep a little less than I did during the first week of school, right, or different times. And then there are often times where we don't know those changes, but being able to kind of pay attention to that is really important. Also thinking about like our feelings, right? Our quote unquote like minor things getting to us more than they might typically, right? You might drop your keys and all of a sudden messed up your whole day. Right, that's probably an indicator that something else is actually bothering you because you actually just picked up your keys right away. Right, are things that might not kind of sit with you as long, sitting with you longer. Right, we can have these kind of check-in moments with ourselves. Paying attention to physical sensations as well. Right, our bodies communicate things. Right, you'll notice I'm really asking you to pay attention to yourselves. Right, to really think, to really kind of be in tune with how you're doing, how you're feeling, how you're thinking, right, and what kind of actions you're engaging in, because those things can be signs, right, to then engage in care practices. And practice, the way that I'm using that term, was introduced by Dr. Della Mosley, right, a Black woman psychologist, who talks about practice as this thing that we get kind of steeped in, so we end up doing them even when we don't think about it, or even when we don't care to do it, right? So, for example, if you develop a journaling practice, right, where you journal every morning or every evening, you might be more likely to turn to that journaling in moments of stress because it's already part of your practice. Right, you might have a gratitude practice, right? Indigenous folks give us this language of gratitude, this practice of gratitude, to be thankful for the land and the world around us, right? If you have this practice of gratitude, you might be more willing to engage in mindfulness or meditations or deep breathing when you begin to feel moments of stress, right? If you have a prayer practice, right, you might be more likely to turn to prayer in these moments because it's already part of how you kind of understand yourself. It's already this practice that you've been building and kind of working toward, right? So these automatic things, right? Just to kind of highlight, right? Some of these practices sometimes allow us to gain perspective on what might be happening, right? So if I drop my keys, if I have this practice of gratitude, right, I might be grateful that I have a door that this key unlocks, right? And so me dropping those keys might not be as big a deal anymore, right? Because I can recognize what this key is connected to. Right, so being able to maintain perspective, thinking about how even challenges that might be current don't always have to last, right? So I think about maintaining perspective. Kendrick Lamar comes to mind, right? I should have put in my bio, right? Hip hop culture influences just how I navigate the world and how I present, right? You can already tell I'm talking with my hands and all of that, right? But Kendrick, right, from Dedication, minor setback for a major comeback, that's my favorite, right? So being able to think about how perspective allows us to see maybe a current challenge and think about ways to kind of overcome that challenge, right? Even if things are the way they are now, they don't necessarily have to remain that way. Yeah, so just briefly, want to highlight, maybe folks have seen this before as well, the self-care wheel. And so we can understand Black folks as holistic beings, right? People as holistic beings. And so, we can think about kind of being, how we consider how we're doing physically, psychologically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Right, so what this shares are just some sample activities that kind of hit at some of these different parts of ourselves, right? You can think about this as maybe a launching point rather than something that's prescriptive in that way, right? So the ask here is to really think about the different aspects of ourselves and how are we attending to, how are we caring for these various aspects of ourselves as we're thinking about developing these care practices, right? What are practices that attend to these various aspects of ourselves? And so again, right, so earlier I mentioned the Psychology of Radical Healing Collective in terms of defining radical healing. They also give us ideas about how to engage in what they call radical self-care as well, right? And similarly, radical meaning, hey, there's a lot of messaging that say that we shouldn't engage in care for ourselves, right? So this radical to actually kind of go against that messaging and care for ourselves and our communities, right? And even in this approach, you start to see this connection between what we're, the self-care, self as individual, but also the self in relation to community as we think about community care, right? And so they give us celebrating culture, making space for our own healing, experience joy, engaging with supports. And so I have an image here from the Black Joy Parade. So the Black Joy Parade is a really large parade in Oakland, California. Right, just past Sunday, they had their 9th annual. And you have this really beautiful celebration of Blackness, right, in a city that often gets a bad rap. Right, when I travel places and they hear I'm from the Bay, they immediately ask particular questions about Oakland, right, that counter experiences of joy, right? And so what the Black Joy Parade does is celebrate Blackness, Black culture in ways that show, hey, we are here, we are laughing, we are loving each other, right? So you have this full parade, right? A lot of folks are marching in the parade, right? Floats, as you might imagine. You also have dance teams, right? You have mental health practitioners kind of walking in the parade, right, letting folks know that they're there, right? You have a lot of folks in the parade, and then you also have a big kind of tabling event as well, kind of immediately following. It's happening at the same time, but essentially immediately following, where you have folks from community organizations, care providers, food, art, programs for kids and parents. Right, you're not just going and signing up, right, but you can actually engage in activities. And it feels like an all-day event, right, specifically centered on celebrating Blackness, celebrating Black joy. Performances, for folks who know the singer Maya, right, she was the performer this past Sunday, right, but you also have acts that might be less known, right, you have cultural presentations happening as well, right, so just a day-long celebration that's happening annually, right, as this kind of radical act, because a lot of what's said about Oakland isn't the Black Joy Parade, it isn't the care, right? It isn't joy, but this is what folks are stating, right? And we can already, and like I said, we can see that kind of connection to community. And so I want us to continue thinking about care as not just an individual practice, but how we show up for others, and also allowing others to show up for us. If we truly say and believe that we're in community with folks, it's not just a one way, right? How do we actually allow folks to show up for us as well? And so what I want to highlight here there's this book, How We Show Up, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community by Mia Birdsong, right? In this book, she gives us examples of what it means to be in community with others and to care with them and to care for them, right? Resources, time, right? Just being with folks, getting to know your neighbors, child care, right? And a host of other examples, right? Of what it might truly mean to kind of show up with each other and for each other. And so I wanted to read a quote, two quotes from here, the second of which will be on the board, on the slide, excuse me. But safety is each of us having the things we need to live a life of well-being, food, shelter, education, healthcare, love, and connection, right? So safety is community care, right? And folks having access. And then the second one, right, again, kind of bringing home that point, which is on the slides, our individuality is intertwined with our connectedness. So the work of healing and growth happens both alone and in relationship to others, right? So again, when we think about community being and existing in that, right, our care for each other, our love for each other is, right, is bound, excuse me. So if we want to kind of extend a bit to and thinking about culture or community, right, as kind of a community culture or cultural community, excuse me, if you will, and particularly we can think about cultural strengths, resources, coping mechanisms that we have, right, and have been passed to us. And so as a way of introduction to that, I want to talk about the 7 strengths of African Americans developed by Dr. Joseph White. Folks who are not familiar with Dr. Joseph White, he is known as the godfather of Black psychology, right, and the ultimate mentor, right? I'll reference that a bit later, right? But so he developed this as a result of looking at African philosophies, cultural traditions, and really looking at the Black experience and what Black folks have historically had to endure and made it through, right? How have folks been able to kind of make it through? And so I'll name these briefly. Improvisation, right? The ability to be resourceful, imaginative, creative, and innovative when navigating life, right? You know, folks might have this experience. We're going to figure it out. Even if you don't know how to figure it out, you're going to know somebody else who might figure it out, or you're going to work together to figure it out, right? So being innovative or improvising in that way. Resilience, here, being able to bounce back after setbacks. Dr. White talks about healing in the broken places. Anytime I mention resilience, I want to be sure, I'm always sure that I say that just because folks are resilient doesn't mean they should have to experience challenges. That things shouldn't be tougher because folks are resilient, right? Just because folks can take it doesn't mean they should, right? So want to be sure to name that explicitly. Connectedness to others, right? Which is why I'm putting this under this kind of community care. And he describes 4 different types of relationships. Relationships with family, biological or chosen, peers, romantic partners, and mentors, right? As I mentioned, Dr. White was the ultimate mentor, right? And part of his approach was to, when you mentor someone, when you are a mentee on the receiving end, the way you pay forward that mentorship is to pay them, what you received is to pay forward to some other folks who might be wanting to navigate the field of counseling and psychology, right? And so this kind of mentoring train continues on. All right, so thinking about our connectedness to others. Spirituality, right? This connection to this higher force, this life-affirming force that provides strength, inspiration, and hope. Emotional vitality as this excitement for life, this energy, right? Approaching life enthusiastically. Black music teaches us that, right? Folks know that it connects to the soul. Last 2, gallows humor, right? The ability to laugh and cry as we move through adversity. Again, you can't tell the story of Black folks without humor, without laughter, without joy. And then a healthy suspicion, acknowledging that Black folks are navigating spaces, or often navigating spaces that weren't intended for them to occupy. And so in that, navigating that, acknowledging that, recognizing that as folks are navigating through. And so the last piece that I'll talk about briefly, is this what I'm calling a societal level, where we're saying, community care and contributing to a greater good, right? And hopefully things that we are doing for ourselves and communities are ultimately creating to some things at a larger society level. And so in this, I'll briefly introduce a framework that my colleagues and I have developed for engaging in action. The first, this was the book that was mentioned in my bio. The first iteration of this was developed for kind of a general population, if you will. And the second iteration, which is where I kind of entered my engagement with this work, was developed for folks who are either currently in the helping professions, counselors, psychologists, social workers, or folks who want to be in, who might be studying or working towards being in that space. But I think both of them have some good information and they're applicable a bit more wide, but a lot of the examples in that second one are situated within the helping profession fields. And so SQUAD, right, is what we call it, kind of centered around 4 areas of reflection. So the first one, strengths. What are the strengths, skills, knowledge, resources that you have or have access to that could be helpful in this larger thought of the work, right? Or against these causes that you might feel passionate about, right? What skills, what strengths, what knowledge, what resources do you have that could be helpful here? Solidarity, right? Who is already doing this work that you're passionate about? Right, what exists? Oftentimes we feel like we have to be the ones to start something without kind of doing some of the work to recognize what efforts might be present already. Right, how can you partner with communities most impacted by a particular issue, right? And making sure that those folks are actually taking the lead rather than moving forward without actually taking those folks into consideration. The last area, strategy, right here we ask you to envision, right, or kind of dream about, if you will, how you would work, what a kind of resolution of this particular issue might actually look like, might actually be, and then what are things that might help you to get there, right? How are you kind of being strategic and planning and then implementing such plans? And then the last piece, as I start to come to a close, is sustainability, right? So thinking about how do we make the work last longer than ourselves, right? And how do we care for ourselves and each other as we're doing the work, right? What practices are we implementing to engage and care for ourselves and the work, which really kind of, if I thought about it, I could have put the first slide back up there again, right? Sustainability kind of brings us to kind of what I'm hoping folks are being able to kind of take away from this presentation today. So I'll wrap up here, right? And having us thinking about how are we caring for ourselves, right? Those folks around us, and ultimately how are those things creating a kind of better world, a greater space. And so I'll end with the same way that I end my classes when I teach, right? Be with your people. Find reasons to laugh, right? Keep on keeping on. As Dr. White would say, keep the faith, right? And thank y'all for allowing me to spend this time with y'all. I know we got Q&A, but appreciate the attention so far. References and stuff.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Layla Bibi. I am a junior political science major on the pre-law track, and I have the honor of serving as the public relations chair for Hope's Black Student Union. Thank you all for showing up today, not just to celebrate Black History Month, but to hear some words of wisdom and knowledge from Dr. Derrick Bines. Can we give him one more round of applause? He was amazing, right?
Thank you.
We are now going to move into the Q&A portion, so if you have questions, which we truly encourage, go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen and submit them. If you are more of a pen and paper type of person, we have volunteers that should be coming around with a pen and paper. So just raise your hand and they will come around with a pen and paper for you to write your question down on. So let's get into it. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So one of my questions was, where do you personally begin to draw the line with community care? Because I feel like sometimes self-care requires some level of isolation, right? So like, where do you personally draw the line with community care and self-care?
Yeah, so I'd actually maybe push back a little bit, and I don't always agree that self-care requires a bit of isolation. I would say that part of that line is knowing yourself. For some folks, you might need to, using your words, isolate, right? But I think
Yeah.
about, folks talk about the difference between the introvert and the extrovert, kind of where you draw energy from, right? Some folks draw energy from being around people. Some folks draw energy from kind of being alone, right? And so partly I would think about what energy, where are you getting energy from? And being aware of that, and if it is on your own, right, thinking about how you can create space to be on your own in that. But yeah, I would also argue that sometimes we get care from being around folks as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. My next question is, what kind of care practices do you utilize like in your own life?
Yeah, personally. Yeah, for sure. I can tell you a little bit about my business. No, so I reference journaling, right? And so when I'm best, I journal in the morning and at night, kind of centered around gratitude and kind of what I hope to learn from the day, and then maybe on the back, maybe some excitements about the day. So I try to maintain the journaling practice. Right now, currently that looks like an actual journal, but it hasn't always. Sometimes it's looked like kind of voice notes or just using the notes app on my phone, the iPhone that I remember when they came out. And yeah, those are probably the two. And I actually just to name one more explicitly, and I mentioned gratitude. I deeply try to engage in the gratitude practice, which is why, like, when I've met folks, right, some of the first things I'm saying is thank you, right? Being appreciative. I start off here with an appreciation for being here. And so that not only allows me to express my gratitude for being here, but also allows me to kind of maybe center myself or kind of calm a bit in spaces. So those are the two that I'll share for sure. And then one more, laughter. Like, I'm gonna throw a joke out there for sure. Yeah.
You got one right now?
Look,
No.
we'll roll with that, right?
Okay, so our next question is, how can white helping professionals operate as allies to people of color they might be working with?
Yeah, so how can white folks be allies to folks that they might be working with? Right, so a couple things come to mind right away. What is the work that you are, like, I think folks can do work on themselves, right? Being aware of biases that continue to show up, being aware of norms that might be distancing or isolating, right? Tapping in, I'm saying, I want to say this thoughtfully, right? Talking to the folks you're working with, right? Or paying attention to the folks you're working with are talking as well, right? Folks of color, black folks specifically, but I think we can extend that, often have the experience where, and I don't want to speak for folks and for folks here, but I want to be named that this is an experience where you might be in a meeting with folks, somebody says something, or a black person, folks of color says something, nobody really responds. 2 people later, maybe a white person says that same exact thing, and everybody has 3 to 5 things to respond back to that person. Pay attention when that happens, right? So there are a lot of these little nuances that happen in the day-to-day that I think go unnoticed, because that person who maybe wasn't listened to might not speak up, but might have left that meeting feeling really isolated, right? So paying attention to those moments, being present, being aware of these dynamics that play out that help folks to feel isolated, that push folks to feel isolated, right? And then when you notice it, think about how many times that's happened that you didn't notice before, right? So I think those are some of the things that come up kind of immediately for me. Yeah. Noticing some of those nuances, paying attention, checking, doing the work on yourself as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Our next question is for someone who is anxious 24/7 and consistently has so many things to do and has a hard time with expressing themselves through the typical arts. What would you recommend to try to feel more grounded and better for like an overall being?
So, excuse me, for someone who is anxious kind of all the time, it sounds like, and doesn't necessarily express themselves in traditional art forms, is what they're saying. Did it say good at or?
Expressing themselves, typical arts,
Yeah.
music, drawing, etc.
Yeah, for sure. One, right, as folks kind of mentioned earlier, CAPS, right, reach out to folks, right, and support. I think sometimes when we're experiencing things, we feel like we have to kind of hold it in, but I think often we like sharing that sometimes can be really useful for folks. And then I'll name, right, kind of what I mentioned, right. Think about practices that you engage in, regardless of whether you're good at them. I think sometimes we get stuck at the good at part, and the practice isn't to be good at something, right? There's probably a better chance that you won't be good at the thing, especially at the start. And so I encourage you to think about practices that you're willing to give a try versus practices that you're good at or bad at. Right? Folks might have tried to meditate before or have a meditation practice or something, but as soon as you're like, okay, I'm gonna do some deep breathing, your mind starts going everywhere, and then then folks might not try to do it anymore. So I would say not to think too much about like what you're good at and what you're bad at, but rather what are things that you can start to practice. And practice again doesn't have to be perfect. And talk to folks. So find your practices, talk to folks, and kind of check in on what are the messaging you're telling yourself as well, right? Those are things that come up right away for me.
Awesome. The increase of AI, how do you suggest maintaining community and care as people start to turn to AI for community?
Yeah. Find your people, right? Like, I am someone who very much prefers to kind of have a conversation with someone in person, preferably, or, talk on the phone or anything like that. That could be a generational thing, right? Folks who know me know I might give you a random call just to see how you're doing. If you don't answer, I'm not hurt. Right, I'm not offended. So I would tell folks in that to kind of be intentional about spending time away from AI, spending time in some of the hubs where people spend time, right, and go, right. I know there's a few coffee shops around the neighborhood, right. Go post up there, right, and do an experiment. See if you can be out there for an amount of time without being on your phone. Yeah. Just see what it's like, right? You pick that amount of time. I'm not telling you, right? You pick the time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. See what that might be like, right? And I think again, it kind of goes back to a practice of kind of being in community, being with folks, finding folks who have similar interests than you, who have similar interests that you have, right? Or are there things that you don't know if you're interested in or not? So you go kind of check something out, right? So I encourage folks to, spend some time away from technology. I know it's harder than it is for me to say it, but yeah, try it, see how it goes, and give it an honest try, right? Doing something once and not liking it or not being good at it, I don't necessarily count that as an honest try because it's new. and new things take time to adjust. New things can be hard. And so kind of, honoring that, encouraging yourself, kind of being, engaged that way are things that kind of come up for me right away.
As a counseling professional, what kind of cultural code switching have you noticed yourself needing to utilize when providing care to people of different cultural backgrounds?
Yeah, so I'll name explicitly that I think about this a lot. And I name that the longer that I've been, this is true in my teaching, and how I present here, I think a lot less about code switching. Part of that is sometimes, we think about code switching in relation to like power, right? And so if I'm in a classroom, for example, as the professor, even in my efforts to try to minimize power, right, I have the most power in the room. And so I help to set a tone. And so if I present as, as close to myself, or I think about how I want to present, if I'm making the decision rather than having the decision made for me, then maybe that allows other folks to do so as well. And so I think also as I become more rooted in and more confident in kind of what I know and what I bring as well, I'm thinking about code switching differently too, right? And so encouraging folks to kind of trust in themselves. And then also, again, I go back to connection. I found that being able to kind of build authentic connections, whether I'm teaching or working or facilitating a space, it allows folks to kind of show up. And so folks tend to respond to that okay. And obviously there's some folks who maybe culturally we're different, and also the way we speak and all of that is different as well. But I think we're able to kind of talk about that and maybe get past that as well. Yeah, but yeah, what I talk to my students about in terms of code switching and show, because we talk a lot about that. I teach graduate students who are entering the field or who are working towards becoming counselors of a variety of sorts, and we talk about like professionalism and all of that a lot. My hope for folks is as you kind of keep going through is that you start to, or you get to a space where you can kind of own some of the power that you do have. And so it's not always how can I show up, like what's allowable in the space, and we move to a space of, and this takes more than just the individual. Spaces have to change and continue to change. So not just what's allowed here, but also how do I want to show up? Because some of that code switching is also about protecting you.
Yeah.
I might not want to engage in certain conversations, or I might want to do, I'm just naming things generally, and so I'll present myself in this way. And that's more of a, hey, I have some of the power in here too. So not just the how can I, but how do I want to. Just add to that.
Got it. Our next question is, given the constraints within the systems that already exist in society, how can we implement changes in order to promote self-care, such as prioritizing sleep and mental health, which ultimately will allow individuals an opportunity to engage in community care?
Given the systems that exist, how can we engage in, can you read that for me one more time?
With the current constraints in the system, how can we implement like changes to promote self-care?
Yeah, for sure. So the things that come up for me, right, is if we're existing in these systems, there can be these options that we have. It doesn't always feel like it. If we're like, can we care for ourselves in the system? Right? Like that might mean making a decision to get some sleep at a time when it doesn't feel like you can. That might mean using some of these, what I call these transition periods, to engage in practices, right? So if you're walking to different spaces, what is your self-talk like during that walk? What is what are you listening to? What are you taking in kind of during that walk, right? If you're commuting somewhere. So doing these what I'll call micro, not in intent, but more so in kind of the moments, these micro kind of care practices. And then also, folks in power, right? How are we thinking, are we aware of the cultural environments that we're either establishing or maintaining? And so how can we as folks who might have, and how folks who might have some of the powers in some of the structures that might be evident, making sure that we're promoting some things that can be healthy for folks as well, or at least providing the time for those things.
Wonderful. How does one cope with negative messages in the workplace from one's own ethnic group?
My first thing is find your people, right? Sometimes the folks we want to be our folks or assume to be our folks aren't our folks. And so being open to finding your folks. I'm speaking more generally because there might be something in that I'm not as familiar with. And so I don't want to talk too specifically about stuff I don't know, but find your people. Find your people, and be open to your people maybe not being the people who you assume to be your people. Yeah, I think that's something that I've learned in a few ways kind of over my career. Right, there's some people who are my people that like maybe if we met in a different setting or a different context, we probably wouldn't have actually interacted. But now like those are some of my people, kind of regardless of background. And so I think thinking about, who your people are, how you know people are your people, and finding those folks.
What would you say to people who have a hard time with like accepting help from others?
Why? Would be my first thing, right?
Dang.
Yeah, and not a why to like say you should, right? Because admittedly, I'm one of those folks,
Yeah.
right? So not a why to like explain yourselves, but an invitation to think about why is it hard to why is it hard to accept, especially depending on how you understand yourself as kind of relating to the world, right? Are you someone who thinks of yourself as someone who gives? And so if you are there differences in, do you understand yourself as different than the person who you're helping? And if no, then what might be there that is preventing you from accepting some of that help as well? So more of an investigative why, a reflective why, than to like explain yourself, this should be something that's really easy for you, why. But so to think about why, to also think about like what receiving help from someone might actually do for that person, right? Might you be stopping something great from coming to that person because you didn't accept their particular help, right? That's a lesson I've learned if I go back to lessons from my community. I remember someone was trying to help me in a particular way, and I was like, I don't need, like, I didn't do, like, I had helped them, and they were like, oh, here's this. And I was like, I didn't do this for that. And they told me straight up, like, hey, like, you might stop me from getting something later because you're not taking this from me. I was like, oh, all right. I hadn't thought about that. I had to sit with it a lot longer, but ultimately I had to sit with that. And so kind of a reflection of why might that be? How might you be more open? What might be coming to that other person, and then, or to the people, and then also truly, if we do consider ourselves to be in community, that doesn't mean just helping other folks. That means also receiving it. If we think about relationships as kind of multi-directional in that way. So those are some of the stuff that comes up. Thank you.
Our last question.
Okay.
You said understanding Black culture goes beyond just knowing the struggle. And this person says that they agree, but how can we effectively communicate what that modern day struggle actually looks like to people who have yet to experience it?
So they agree that it's more than struggle, but in that question, there's an acknowledgement that there are current struggles. And so how to explain the current struggles to folks who might not have experienced it yet.
Yep.
That's how you interpret the question? I think so people to come, like maybe future generations, is, yeah. So, one, I think things are being documented. I think current struggles are being documented. I think when right now is history, if I'm thinking about it from that perspective, I think folks are writing the books. Folks are writing the books. Folks are giving the talks. Folks are doing the podcasts. Folks are posting on the gram, right, and the TikToks, right. I think there's actually, I think there will be a wide archive for future generations to be able to look back on this current moment and be able to see and witness. And my hope is that as those future generations, as they mature, grow, kind of develop, is that they're not reading about, they're not experiencing the exact same things in the exact same way that folks might be experiencing now. Because there's also folks kind of pushing and doing the work as well, right? So I would say that things are being documented, things are out there, folks are writing the books in a full way to document the current moment, kind of at least as the way I see it and understand it. I also think that I think about this as, of a young child at home, and I think about like the books that we read to her as well, right? That capture some of the current moment, but also some fictional, some not, right? But I think there's kind of levels, and things are being documented in ways that I think will help to inform future generations. Yeah, of all of it, of the struggle, of the care, of the joy, and of the realities of Black folks, kind of in the current moment.
Amazing. Well, that was the last question. So as we wrap up, let's give a huge thank you to Dr. Bines.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
If there's one thing to take away from this, it's that we all definitely have the power to be agents of change, advocating for equity and inclusion in all of our communities. So now for a little shameless BSU promo, because why not? We wrapped up our Black Excellence Dinner this past Saturday, and it was truly an incredible evening. It was so powerful to see so many students, faculty, and community members come together to celebrate achievement, culture, and excellence. We are also looking ahead to March and are excited to be collaborating with ASU for an upcoming event, so be sure to stay tuned. And before the month ends, don't forget to go check out our Afrofuturism library display. It is definitely worth seeing. And before you guys go, make sure to mark your calendars for the next upcoming Diversity Lecture Series event. We have the Pan-African Lecture partnered with a Great Performance Series as we welcome the 5-time Grammy-winning Ladysmith Black Mambazo group. Tickets are sold out, but we are excited for this performance happening on Thursday, March 12th at 7:30 p.m. at the Jack Miller Concert Hall. And then we'd also like to invite you guys out to the 2026 Women's History Month lecture happening on Monday, March 16th at 3:30 p.m. in the Jack Miller Concert Hall. We are excited to be welcoming the first Asian American woman elected to the Michigan legislature, Senator Stephanie Chang, who will be speaking on identity, activism, and advancing change for women and girls. A special thank you to everyone who made this event possible, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, the Cultural and Inclusive Excellence Division, the Departments of Sociology and Social Work, and the Black Student Union. We truly appreciate your support, and thank you all for spending your time with us today. We had a wonderful evening. Thank you.